Okay, here we go. This is the Chapter 1, Lesson 1, and we are talking here about inductive reasoning, arguments from analogy. Okay, now let's do a bit of a review and keep some things in mind. Let's try to recall what inductive reasoning is. Okay, for our lessons to this point, we distinguished between inductive and deductive reasoning. Okay? Inductive reasoning, recall, is when I produce reasons to believe that a conclusion is true, and the reasons that I produce to believe that that conclusion is true are intended to make the conclusion likely to be true. They support the conclusion, though they don't guarantee it. This was the difference between then inductive and deductive reasoning. Deductive reasoning is where the premises are offered as proof or as a guarantee or as a demonstration of the conclusion. Those things are synonymous, those terms. So recall from our work in chapters 1 and 2 that we've distinguished inductive and deductive reasoning, and at this point we are focusing exclusively on inductive reasoning. And actually, more specifically, in this lesson, we're focusing on one form of inductive reasoning, that being the argument from analogy. Okay? So there's a question here about how we can reason non-deductively or inductively about specific things or what we might call particulars. Okay? Now, I want you to be careful here. A particular is not a single thing. It can also be collections of things, right? A particular could be the collection of things that are mongooses, or the collection of things that are Yeti coolers, or the collection of things that are Bic pens. Okay, the particulars can be they don't have to be a single individual item. What we're talking about are collections or groups or individuals, and how we reason about those particulars. Okay, one way that we do that, okay, or rather the question here is how exactly would we go about supporting a conclusion that we draw about particulars, about specific things, okay, about boys or about girls or about Apple computers or these sorts of things, or about my Apple computer, or about there is a PC on my desk, but admittedly it's a borrowed one. I would never purchase one of my own free will. So I do have various other things on my desk. They're particulars, things that we could talk about. I have a lamp. I have a one of the knockoff Yeti drink holders, which is actually pretty phenomenal. I've got a pencil sharpener. Don't really even use pencils. Don't quite know why it's there, but I have one. I got a phone, right? How do we reason about these sorts of particulars? Okay, well, isn't that a great question? All right, there we go. Oftentimes, the tool that we use to reason about specifics um, and is through the use of an argument by analogy. Sometimes you'll hear me say an argument from analogy. In fact, most often I talk about an argument from analogy. How so this is a very common tactic. Let me give you an example of an argument from analogy, okay? So nothing bad happened when we left Vietnam, so nothing bad will happen if we leave Iraq. Okay? That's an example of an argument from analogy, and there's something that I want you to believe, and I'm giving you a reason why. The thing that I want you to believe, or the thing that I am attempting to establish as true, is that nothing bad will happen if we leave Iraq. Now, what reason am I giving you for thinking that that's true? Well, because it is claimed here that nothing bad happened when we left Vietnam. Okay, So notice that this sort of reasoning says that we should believe that something is true in the one case because it's true in the other case. Okay? Nothing bad will happen when we leave Iraq because nothing bad happened when we left Vietnam. Okay? All right, let's try another argument from analogy. Saddam was just like Hitler. That's why we had to take him out. Okay. This person wants to argue, or this person is arguing, that we needed to take out Saddam Hussein. Okay. Why? Well, because he's analogous to, he's just like Hitler, and we had to take Hitler out. So, since we had to take Hitler out, and Saddam is just like Hitler, we have to take Saddam out. And here you have our premises and our conclusion. Let's try another one. Her mom is really nice. I'll bet her dad is too. This person is contending that this person, whoever person we're talking about, that their dad is nice. Now, why? Well, because they're betting that dad is like mom, and mom is really nice. Okay, there you go. I know lots of really nice moms who are married to really mean guys. I think that might be the case in my family, but we'll leave that alone. All right, so, and here's another example. This is one from the book. I'll have another one from the book after this, but here's one from the book. Bill likes hunting, so, or therefore, his brother Sam does too. So we're wondering whether Sam likes hunting, and this person clearly believes that Sam does like hunting. Well, on what basis? Well, because Bill, Sam's brother, likes it, and we know how brothers are so alike, right? Notice the reasoning here. Next one, or here's the last one, and this one is also from your reading. Darby is an excellent dog sitter. Therefore, she would be an excellent babysitter. This person is concluding that Darby is going to be a great babysitter, an excellent babysitter, as a matter of fact. Why? Well, because Darby is an excellent dog sitter, and the assumption here is that dog sitting is very much like babysitting. If you can sit dogs, you can sit babies. I don't know if that language makes sense, but there you go. All right, so what do these three arguments have in common? Those are examples of arguments from analogy. We actually use this sort of reasoning a lot. It's actually a very common form of reasoning. So let's break it down then. Let's talk about its structure and its essential elements so that we can then learn how to critically evaluate it. And critically evaluating arguments like this will be the point of the next lesson. For now, I just want to isolate for you what the structure of those arguments is. So here's what the three arguments all are. There's actually more than three, weren't there? What those various arguments had in common, okay? They have a certain form. Basically, there are two things that you're comparing. We'll call them X and Y. And we're saying that this X, whatever that is like that, which is Y. So whatever holds for Y will also hold for X. So in other words, hey, these two things are alike, X and Y. And if there's something that's true of X, then we should also believe, because they're similar, that that thing is also true of Y, whatever that thing is, right? Nothing bad happened when we left Vietnam, so nothing bad will happen when we leave Iraq. We're assuming that the war in Iraq and the war in Vietnam are similar, and what holds for one, the war in Vietnam, will also hold for the other, the war in Iraq. That is, nothing bad will happen when we leave. Okay. All right. Now, here's another way of making this point. We should believe that X has this property because Y is like it and has the same property. Again, here's the example. Leaving Iraq would be like leaving Vietnam. Nothing bad happened when we left Vietnam, so nothing bad will happen when we leave Iraq. Okay. So here's a little bit more about that format. Okay, X is like Y, therefore what holds for Y will hold for X. In that case, X and Y are what we refer to as the analogs, the two things that we're comparing, the two things that we're saying are similar, are what we call analogs. Okay? They're the two things that are the elements or the points or the parts of comparison in the analogy. They are the analogs. Okay? Now, the premise analog is different from the conclusion analog. In the example above, X is our conclusion analog and Y is our premise analog. And what that means is that X is the thing that I want to draw my conclusion about, and Y is the thing that has this property that I think is similar to the thing I want to draw my conclusion about. Okay? So the X in this case, the conclusion analog, is the what to believe is true, and Y is part of the premise. It's the premise analog, all right? One other element here that we need to talk about, and that is the thing that is the same between X and Y. And the thing that is the same between X and Y, that Y has, that we argue because they're the same, X also has, we refer to that as the attribute of interest, okay? So let's try an example here, all right? Let's see. Rats live longer if put on a calorie-restricted diet. So humans will live longer if they are put on a calorie-restricted diet. Now, this is an argument from analogy. There are two things being compared, or two, remember what we call them, analogs. There is a premise analog and a conclusion analog. So looking at this, what is my conclusion? My conclusion is that humans will live longer if put on a calorie-restricted diet. So I hit my microphone. So my conclusion analog is humans. Now, why do I think that? Well, because rats, these other things, live longer if they are put on a calorie-restricted diet. So that makes my premise analog rats. So here are my two analogs, rats and humans, and which is the premise analog and which is the conclusion? The premise analog is rats and the conclusion analog is humans. All right? Now, what is the attribute of interest? What is the thing that I'm saying is the same between the two? The thing that we know is true in the premise analog, rats, that we are contending, therefore, is true in the conclusion analog, being humans. In this case, that is that they will live longer on a calorie-restricted diet. Okay? All right, so those are the essential elements to walk through. That's what an argument from analogy is, and that's what its essential elements are and sort of how they relate. The next lesson will then be about how to critically evaluate arguments from analogy, and we'll go through a number of exercises there.